Picture this. The year is 2400 BC. You are standing at the edge of a city in southern Mesopotamia, a place called Lagash. The ground beneath your feet is flat, dark, and still damp from the last irrigation cycle. Around you, a dense network of mud brick walls stretches in every direction, interrupted only by the glint of water in the canals. This city covers roughly 600 hectares. Tens of thousands of people live here. It is one of the largest urban centers on Earth at this moment in history. But no one outside this region knows it exists. There are no roads connecting it to the wider world, only waterways. And the question is simple: what does a day actually look like here? Not for the king, not for the priest, for the person who wakes up before dawn, works until the light fades and does it again tomorrow. The sky over Lagash begins to lighten before anyone in your neighborhood is fully awake. The air carries the smell of the marshes, fish, reeds, and the particular dampness of a landscape built almost entirely on water and clay. You're inside a house made of sun-dried mud brick, one room stacked against the next, in a block that shares walls with its neighbors on 3 sides. The floor is packed earth, the ceiling is low. There are no windows facing the street, only a small interior courtyard that pulls light and air into the rooms around it. Most families in this city live in some version of this arrangement. The courtyard is where cooking happens, where children stay during the day, where tools are stored. Beneath the floor of this house there may be a burial. It is common in Lagash to inter the dead under the domestic floor, in a flexed position, wrapped in matting. The living and the dead share the same address. That is not unusual. That is simply how it is done here. Outside, the city is already in motion. The first sounds of the morning are not voices, they are water sounds. The canals that run through and around Lagash carry current at all hours. Wooden boats move along them before full light. Small vessels loaded with fish, reeds, clay pots, or grain bundles pass through the narrow waterways that connect the residential blocks to the larger distribution channels. There are no wheeled carts on most of these paths. The water is the road. By mid-morning, the city is fully operational. Lagash is not organized around a single center. It is a multi-nodal city, several urban clusters connected by canals, each with its own administrative and religious infrastructure. The temples sit at the heart of this system. The temple of Ningirsu, the warrior god of Lagash, controls large tracts of agricultural land outside the city walls. The temple of Inanna manages its own estates. These are not only spiritual institutions, they are the largest employers and landowners in the region. A significant portion of the working population in Lagash is tied to the temple economy. These workers, farmers, fishermen, weavers, millers, brewers, herdsmen, receive their compensation not in coin, which does not yet exist here, but in rations. Barley is the primary unit of exchange. A worker might receive a daily allocation of barley, measured by the temple scribes, and recorded on small clay tablets pressed with a reed stylus. Oil and wool are also distributed on a seasonal basis. The system is precise. The records are meticulous. Thousands of these tablets have survived. If you work in the fields today, you are likely working land that belongs to the temple, supervised by an overseer who reports to a senior administrator. The fields outside Lagash grow emmer wheat and barley in the season following the flood. Date palms line the edges of the irrigation channels. Vegetable plots, onions, garlic, lentils, cucumbers run along the banks of the smaller canals where moisture is most reliable. The agricultural calendar is the organizing principle of everything. The irrigation schedule determines when you work, what you plant, and how much you eat. Not everyone works for the temple. There are landholders in Lagash, private citizens who own plots and employ their own labor. There are craftsmen who work in workshops outside the temple complex, potters firing ceramics in kilns, metalworkers casting copper tools and weapons, stonecutters shaping imported rock into cylinder seals and ornamental objects. The raw materials for this work come from far away. Copper arrives from the region of Oman, carried by sea and river. Lapis lazuli comes from what is now Afghanistan. Carnelian beads travel from the Indus Valley. Lagash sits at the intersection of long-distance trade routes that stretch across the ancient world. By midday, the heat is significant. This is southern Mesopotamia. The sun is direct, and the shade is scarce. Activity in the open field slows. Workers return to covered areas, the interior courtyards of the workshops, the shaded loading zones near the canal docks, the storehouses attached to the temple complexes. The midday meal for most people in Lagash is simple and consistent. Bread made from barley flour, baked flat or in small rounds. Fish, dried, salted or fresh, depending on the season and your proximity to the marshes. Onions and garlic eaten raw or cooked into a thick paste. Lentils prepared as a soup. Dates, which grow abundantly in this region and serve as both food and a form of sweetener. Beer, brewed from barley, consumed daily by adults and distributed by the temples as part of the standard ration. It is not a luxury, it is a staple. The distribution of food in Lagash follows a structured hierarchy. Temple workers at different grades receive different quantities. A senior official receives more barley, more oil, more wool than a field laborer. A slave receives the minimum. The records show all of this in careful, dry notation. Quantities, names, dates, allocations. The administrative apparatus behind daily food distribution in this city is one of the most documented systems in the ancient world. The canals that make this food system possible require constant maintenance. Silt accumulates, banks erode, channels shift after floods. There are workers in Lagash whose entire function is the maintenance of the irrigation network, dredging sediment, reinforcing earthen walls, managing water gates that control flow between the primary channels and the fields. Without this labor, the fields fail within a season. The city understands this. The canal maintenance records are kept with the same care as the grain allocations. In the afternoon, the institutional life of the city is at its most visible. The temples are not silent during the day. Priests and priestesses carry out their duties in the inner sanctuaries. Offerings are prepared, rituals performed, hymns recited. The outer courtyards of the temple complex are more public spaces. Scribes work in the shade of the walls, recording transactions, managing accounts, drafting administrative orders. Young men learning the scribal craft practice their cuneiform on small clay tablets, pressing the same signs over and over until the shapes become automatic. The legal and administrative functions of Lagash operate through the palace and the temple simultaneously. Disputes over land boundaries, irrigation access, and labor obligations are adjudicated by officials who answer to the ruler, the Enzi or Lugal, depending on the period. Around 2400 BC, Lagash is in an era of significant territorial power. The ruler Eannatum has extended the city-state's control over neighboring Sumer, and the famous stele of the vultures, a carved stone monument commemorating a military victory, was produced during this general period. That monument still exists. It is in a museum in Paris, but on an ordinary afternoon in the city, military history is background noise. What is visible is administration, craft, and movement. Boats arrive at the docks carrying goods from the marshes and the agricultural districts. Deliveries of fish and reeds are unloaded and counted. Workers carry ceramic jars into the storehouses. A group of weavers sits in the shade of the textile workshop, working wool on hand looms. The sound of a copper hammer comes from somewhere deeper in the craftsman's quarter. The city also contains spaces that function as marketplaces, though not in the modern sense of open stalls and prices negotiated on the spot. Exchange in Lagash is more regulated. Goods move through the temple and palace redistribution system, but private trade also exists. Neighbors trading surplus vegetables for pottery, fishermen exchanging dried fish for grain. The medium of exchange is weight. Silver by weight is used for larger transactions, barley by volume for daily exchanges. There are no coins. There are standardized weights made of stone. As the afternoon fades, the pace of outdoor work shifts. The canal boat traffic decreases. Workers carrying loads along the narrow lanes between buildings move with the slower rhythm of the late day. Families begin to gather inside their courtyard compounds. The cooking fires, small clay hearths set into the courtyard floor, are lit again for the evening meal. The smell of barley bread and fish mixes with the persistent smell of the canals. The interior of a Lagash house is dim in the evening. Clay oil lamps, small open-spouted vessels filled with sesame oil, provide the primary light source. Each lamp produces a low, flickering flame sufficient to illuminate a small area. Rooms are small enough that 1 or 2 lamps are adequate for basic tasks. Conversation, the preparation of food, the care of children. These happen in the warm, contained light of the courtyard and the adjacent rooms. Families in Lagash are extended household units. Parents, children, grandparents, and sometimes domestic servants or slaves share the same compound. The household, the E in Sumerian, is both a family unit and an economic unit. Its members work within the same system, share the same rations, and bury their dead under the same floors. Property passes through the family line. Contracts governing marriage, inheritance, and land use are written on clay tablets and stored in the household. Children in this city are present in the archaeological record in a specific way. Small objects identified as toys, clay animals, miniature vessels, appear in the same deposits as the adult materials. Childhood in Lagash is not documented in narrative terms, but the physical evidence suggests it occupied the same spaces, the same courtyards, the same daily routines as everything else. After dark, Lagash contracts. There is no public lighting. The streets between the dense residential blocks are narrow and unlit after sunset. Movement outside the household after dark is limited to those with specific reasons. Night watchmen, boat pilots navigating by starlight, temple personnel carrying out nocturnal religious duties. Most people are inside. The city is not entirely quiet at night. The canals move continuously. Dogs, present throughout the city during the day, are more audible after dark. The marshes around Lagash produce their own constant ambient sound: frogs, birds, the movement of reed beds in the wind. The boundary between city and wetland is not sharp. Water is everywhere in every direction. The temple complexes maintain a continuous presence through the night. Fires burn in the sanctuary areas. Watchmen are posted at the gates of the major institutional compounds. The administrative districts of the city, the areas around the palace and the large temples, are more guarded than the residential quarters. The logic is straightforward. The storehouses hold grain, oil, wool, and imported materials worth significant value within the redistribution economy. Petty theft and local disputes are part of urban life in Lagash, as in every city. The legal texts from this period include records of property disputes, accusations of theft, and debt obligations. But there is no dedicated police force in the modern sense. Enforcement is localized. Household heads, workshop supervisors, temple officials exercise authority within their own domains. The city maintains order through hierarchy more than through patrol. By the middle of the night, Lagash is at its most still. The boats are docked. The workshops are dark. The courtyard fires have burned down to coals. The city will begin again before dawn. Lagash in 2400 BC is a functioning urban system of considerable complexity. It manages the agricultural output of a large irrigated territory through a centralized record-keeping apparatus. It imports raw materials from across the ancient world and produces finished goods for redistribution and trade. It administers land, labor, food, and law through institutions, the temple, the palace, the scribal system, that have been developing for centuries before this moment. The irrigation infrastructure that makes all of this possible is documented in cuneiform texts as a 4-level network, from the main rivers to the fields, managed by dedicated workers and recorded by administrators. The writing system used to maintain these records is among the oldest in the world. By 2400 BC, it has already been in use for several centuries and is capable of expressing not only numbers and quantities, but names, legal formulas, and narrative accounts. What this city built was not spectacular in the visual sense. No massive pyramids, no marble columns. What it built was a working system: canals, warehouses, tablets, weights, rations, the architecture of daily life at scale. The people who lived here did not know they were living at what later historians would call the early dynastic period of Sumer. They knew the canal schedule, the temple ration, the weight of a clay jar full of barley beer, the sound of a boat arriving at the dock before dawn. That was Lagash, that was a day. If you want to explore more ancient cities like this one, places where the infrastructure was extraordinary and the daily life was almost entirely undocumented until archaeology recovered it, let us know which civilization you want to visit next.